Nadine Dorries has been speaking out about reducing the UK's pills by post-abortion timeline, having previously argued for a reduction in the legal termination of 24 weeks, the limit. The former Conservative Secretary of State spoke of psychological scarring she experienced when witnessing a late termination of a fetus during her time as a trainee nurse. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by Nadine Dorries, who's an author and, of course, is the former Conservative Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. Welcome to the show, Nadine. Always a pleasure. Very moving article you wrote in the Mail on this topic. And, of course, society seems to be getting ever closer to making abortion much, much easier. And yet you've reflected back on an experience you witnessed when a trainee nurse. Can you share that with us, please?
Yeah, so the point of writing the article is in my column in today's Daily Mail is because very soon the Criminal Justice Bill is coming back to Parliament, and to that bill, two Labour MPs, Stella Creasy and Diana Johnson, have laid down an amendment asking for the decriminalisation of pills by post, abortion pills, abortifacient pills sent to people's homes up until birth. So at the moment, the limit is 24 weeks. And what they're saying is that that women who abort later and either by accident or because they've lied about the point at which they're pregnant shouldn't be prosecuted. They shouldn't be criminalised for doing so. And actually, as a health minister, I was completely opposed to the pills by post being put in place. And that's because what the system used to do was women used to go to a clinic, they used to have an ultrasound, we used to be able to tell exactly how many weeks pregnant they were. Then they were given the pills to take home. Now what's happened is the system depends on the woman declaring on what stage of pregnancy she's at. We're expecting her to be truthful and to know fully her own body, which is, fair enough. But it is a system which is open to abuse for desperate and vulnerable women. And what they can find themselves in is a terrible situation where they're actually aborting late-term fetus, 24 weeks onwards, and they could be aborting live fetuses. And many women are going through this process at home and alone. And sorry, just on your introduction, you said I campaigned against early abortion. I've never done that. I'm actually someone who's an advocate for early abortion as easy as possible, as accessible as possible, so that we prevent the situation where we end up having late-term abortions.
So, Nadine, it's a thorny topic, and of course there's this balancing act between my body, my choice, women's rights, dating back decades, and of course to the point where the unborn child, at what point do they become a human? And if we're aborting so late via pills, there's also the damage psychologically and physically it can do to the mother, because they may not be equipped for what's about to happen.
Well, that's very true. And what's happening now is that neonates are being born ever earlier because medical science has advanced so much. Neonatal care has advanced. We have babies being born at 23, 22, 21 weeks who are surviving. It's unlikely without medical intervention that babies born at that point would survive because their lungs simply aren't developed enough to do so. And what I wrote in my article was when I witnessed a 27-week termination, because when I was trained to be a nurse, it was legal up to 28 weeks, and a baby breathed and lived for 7 minutes. It was a horrible, awful situation. And what we're doing by decriminalising, or what Stella Creasy and Diana Johnson want to do in amending this bill, is put women in a position where they will be at home facing that situation. I was a nurse assisting a late-term abortion. These will be women aborting their own babies who will have a breathing baby in their arms afterwards. And that's not a position I would want to see any woman have to be in, whether they arrive there by accident or not. It's not a position, it's mentally scarring, and it's also physically very difficult. And so I'm hoping that, and I know many of us are, that Miriam Cates, who is one of the few Conservative MPs who actually does her job and isn't vying to be Prime Minister, is rallying the support of Conservative MPs to vote down the entire criminal justice bill if these amendments are voted on. And it's a drastic measure because it will vote down many, many measures that are needed in that bill. But I'm afraid if the swan song of a Conservative government is going to be that it legalised abortion up until the point of birth, and, our lack of achievement is a low bar. But that would be a pretty awful thing for a Conservative government to finish on.
I think many people listening in will totally agree with that heartfelt message, Nadine. What would you like to see as a more healthy compromise?
So I just don't want this amendment to go through. And I'd like to see women who want to abort up until 12 weeks or wherever, not to have to go through the process of 2 doctors' signatures. It's a farce. It's ridiculous because apart from anything else, quite often doesn't happen. But that, women are adults. They're adults. They know what, at that stage, they know what they want to do. And it should be far more accessible than it is now. Having said that, the pills by post has 87% of abortions take place under pills by post. It is still the case that if you have to go to a clinic or a doctor, the legal limit of 24 weeks will apply. But I just think making, at an early stage, the whole system much more streamlined, easier for women to obtain. And then that will reduce the number of abortions overall because women won't be having, late-term abortions. Women will, and probably better access to, sorry, those two are not co-joined, also better access to we now have antibiotics available at pharmacy without having to go and see a GP first. Maybe we should be doing the same with birth control for women. So there are lots of measures that can be put in place to make it so that we can make abortions rarer and not as dangerous, and that women won't need to go for late-term abortions if we can put much more emphasis on the early stages.
OK, Nadine Dorries, a heartfelt plea. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon on GB News. Always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.